Hey dev team, welcome back to Flutter with Drag. In this episode what I want to do is start putting some maps into our app, maps for the events really for now, and also going to play around with some custom markers on the map, which I think will be quite interesting. So to do this, let's get cracking, and I'm already in my Firestore, and for each of the events I've added three things. I've added an address, and I've added a latitude and longitude. It is possible to add a geopoint which has latitude and longitude, but that just makes our setup a little bit more complicated. So for now I've added all of that, or the latitude and longitude, as a number. So you need to make sure those are numbers, as you can see there, and the address is a string. Okay. Now, to get the latitude and longitude of somewhere, I just went to Google Maps and I found where I wanted to hold my conference, and I'm just going to hold it around the Google offices. And you just right click on one of the markers there, and clicking on that will allow you to copy the latitude and longitude to your clipboard. Then you can paste it in as needed. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to come to our Cloud console. So this is console.cloud.google.com. We need to log in, and we need to make sure at the top we have our project selected. And with that selected, we need to come to the menu on the left here, come all the way down to Google Maps Platform and click on that. Now, if that doesn't appear for you, you can search for it up here just by typing in Google Maps, and you want to come to this Google Maps platform. Okay, we need to enable some APIs, and for now I'm just going to do Android, but you might need to do iOS as well if you're doing an iOS app. So here we are for Maps SDK for Android. I'm going to click on that and enable that API. Okay, with that API enabled, I'm going to come down here to credentials, and we need to get a API key for that. We've already got some automatic keys that have been created for us, but I'm going to create a separate one for this map. To do that, at the top we're going to click on Create Credentials, come to API key, and we're going to copy that, and I'm just going to paste that into Notepad or somewhere and close that. So that's created this API key for us. I'm just going to edit this now by clicking the pencil icon on the right, and I'm going to make sure that only my app can use it, and you can do that by selecting Android app here and putting some things in. I'm actually going to leave it as none for now, and we'll come back to that later on when we come towards publishing our app. But I am going to restrict the key to make sure that this key only can call some of the Maps APIs and not something else, because anybody with that API key might be able to call any of your APIs. So I'm going to restrict that, and in there I'm just going to type in map and click on Maps SDK for Android. So that API key can only work for this one map API. I'm also going to change the name, API key, and I'm just going to call it Android map. And save that. And in case you're wondering about any security implications, by the time you see this, that key will be gone. So we've got that set up, and that's ready to go. The next thing we need to do is hop over to our code. Okay, and in here I have got the app running at the moment. I'm just going to stop it because we do need to make some changes. The first change we're going to make is Control-Shift-P and add a dependency. And the dependency we want to add is Google_Maps maps plural underscore flutter, and we'll just give that a second to install. Okay, now for that to run, we need to come up to our Android folder, our app, our source, our main, and our Android manifest. And in here, we need to add some more metadata. And the metadata we need to add is metadata Android name equals, and this is vital we get this right, com.google.android.geo.api_key, and then Android value equals, and then the API key that you copied a moment ago. And that's how Google will know what API key belongs to this app. We'll save that. The other thing we need to do is we need to come to our app build Gradle, and in here we need to set the minimum STK version to 20. So done that. Okay, and with that done, I am going to just launch the app. Fabulous, we're in and we've got no errors. So we need to come now to we can close down all this Android stuff, that's fine. We need to come to our models, to our conf event, and we need to add in the bits of information that we've added to our database. So we have a string address, we have a double, which is the latitude, and we have a double, which is the longitude. And all of that's going to be required. So required this dot address, required this dot latitude, required this dot longitude. Okay, coming down, we need to override our two columns here to add those things in. So address, in fact, it'll be quicker just to copy that line 3 times. And we're going to have address, latitude, and a longitude. And we're going to have in here address, latitude, and longitude. Now we're getting these errors because the database doesn't know about that yet. That will solve in a moment. So here we need to tell our database about this. So we have, copy that for address, which is going to be a text field. I'll copy it again. Now this is going to be it's not an integer, it's a floating number or double, and in SQL speak it's what's called a real number. So we're going to have this as a real column, latitude, and that's going to be a real number, lat and long. Okay, save that. Now if we come to the bottom here where we have our server running and create a new terminal, let's run our Flutter packages run build_runner build, and hit enter and give that a second to rebuild the part files. And while that does that, we should see, once that's done, we should see these red lines disappear. And there we go. That's all built and all disappeared. And that's our model sorted out and our database. Almost. So the database, if you remember, has version numbers. And we've now changed the schema of our database. We've added more columns. So really what we should do here, and what we would have to do if this was a published app, is set that to a higher number, 2, and then in our building over here we would have to say, well, if we're going between version 1 and 2, we need to add these columns and do all sorts of stuff. Because this app hasn't been released, what I'm going to do is when we open the database and we get our file name, I'm simply going to delete the database temporarily, and so it will rebuild itself. So I'm going to now do a hot restart, and that has now deleted the database and rebuilt it. And then I'm simply going to get rid of that line and save it again. And when I run it again, it'll be getting everything from the database as designed. But now our data has those extra, the database has those extra columns in. All right, that's all the setup done, and now we can get on with it. So what is it we want to happen? Well, what I want is when I click on one of these, I want it to go to a page about that event, and we can see some details about it. So in order to do that, we need to start off by creating that screen. So in our screens folder, I'm going to put this immediately in another new folder. We're going to call this event. And in there, we're going to have a new file called event screen.dart. Okay, so let's just flesh this out very quickly. It's going to be a stateless widget called event screen. We're going to import our material, and just to get it working, we're going to have a scaffold, and that's going to have a body with a center with a child of text saying event screen, and that'll do immediately. Okay, so we're using named roots, if you remember. So if we come across to our main.dart, in fact, I nearly did it again. If we come to our index.dart in our screens folder, let's export that screen. So event screen.dart, then come to our main.dart, and where we have our, here we go, roots, we're going to add in a new root called event, and that's going to go to the event screen. We'll save that. Okay, now we need to be able to click on the event to get to that screen. So come to our home page, widgets, and our agenda, and within our agenda we have an event card, which is a stack which makes up the event details on the page. So we're going to wrap the stack with a widget, which is going to be a gesture detector, and we're going to say on tap we're going to do something, and that is navigator dot push named, and the name is going to be event. Let's save that, and now if we click on one of these, we come to our event screen. Okay, we've got no back arrow, but we can use the phone back button to get back, and that's fantastic. But what we do need to know is what event are we on? Which event is this? At the moment, all of these go to the same place, and it's going to be the same screen. So we need to somehow pass the ID number with it. And we can do that very simply in our push named. We can just add in here an arguments, and I'm just going to send the event ID. And that's all we need to do on the agenda page. Everything else now comes under the event screen. So first thing first, let's get this event ID out. And we can do that by saying final event ID equals modal root of context dot settings dot arguments, and this is going to be a string that we're getting back. Now, this is complaining because it could be null, but we know it's not, so we're putting that there. So now if we change our event screen to also include the event ID, it can no longer be a const. But if we save that and now click on our event, we now have this event ID UOC88. And if we click on a different event, we have the different event ID. So now on our event page, we can access the event ID, and therefore we'll be able to get that from the database. But in order to get it from the database and do all the other stuff we need to do with it, we're going to have to maintain a state. And so, as we've been doing all along, we're going to create a block. Now, I've been thinking in my head, do I want to hear a block or a qubit? And what we're doing probably warrants a qubit at the moment, but looking forward, it's almost certainly going to need a block on this page. There's going to be more stuff going on, so I'm going to start off by creating a block rather than a qubit, because otherwise we'll just have to convert it later on. So right click, block, new block, and we'll call this the event screen block. Okay, that gives us our 3 files. Let's start working on it. Let's start with the state. So there's going to be 2 states. There's going to be the event screen loading. Well, we could leave it as initial, but I'm going to call it loading. And there's going to be the event screen loaded. Now, the event screen loaded is going to have some extra information. For example, it is going to have the event, which is a conf event, which we'll call event. I'm also going to want to know what page I'm on. And what I mean by this is within our event page, we're going to have some tabs at the bottom. One initially with the details of the event, and the other page, which is going to be the map, so we can see the map. And we need to know what page we're going to be on. And I'm going to do that with another set of classes, because like we did previously, and I'm just trying to remember what we did it previously for, I can't quite remember. It was for an error message for authentication, I think it was. But what we need to do here is have the ability to have extra or different information depending on the page. That'll make sense in a moment. First of all, I want an enum of event page type, and there's going to be 2 for now, details and map. Then we're going to have an abstract class called event page, which is going to extend equatable. We'll need a const for that because it's going to be part of a constant constructor, and we need to override the props for that, even though currently there are no props. Okay, so that's the abstract class. So the first page is going to be event page details, and that's going to extend an events page. And again, because that's going to be the initial one and part of the constant constructor, we need an event page details constructor. The second one is going to be an event page map, and that is also going to extend the events page. And we don't need to put the constant constructor there now because it's not going to be part of an initial thing, but this is going to have more information in it soon, but I'll come back to that one after. So now we've got those under our screen state, we can put in here a final event page, which we'll call page. Now we need a constant constructor for that, so let's create that. const. It's going to be this event and this page, and we'll put those as named, and this is going to be required, and this is going to be set as a default event page details. That's going to be our initial details page, and that's going to have to be a const. Okay, so those are our starting bits of information. We're also going to need a copy with for this, and we can do that with control dot and generate copy with, and that will create that for us. Okay, so that's our state taken care of. Let's come back to the block and just delete that for a moment. And we've got an event screen, and the initial one is going to be loading. Okay, so when we load, we're going to want to load up event. So we're going to have to set up some events for our block. This is where the word event is going to get confusing, because we've got event of conference events and events for the block. I'll try and call it conference event when I'm talking about a conference event. That might make things easier. Okay, so let's have a class load event, which extends an event screen event, and that is going to take a final string event ID. That's going to need some props, and the props is going to be the event ID. It's also going to need a constructor. We'll create that as a constant constructor. Okay, save that. So coming over here, we can now put in our constructor here and say on load event, we're going to call a method load event, which we're going to control dot and create that method. Now, if we're loading something from the database, we're going to need to have access to the database. So at the top, we're going to have a final app database, which we will call DB. Save a little bit of typing. And so we're going to require that as an input. So app database DB, and in our initializer, we'll set our private database to equal the database we've just sent in. Fantastic. So what we're going to do now in the load event is load that event from the database. Now, previously, if we look at our database class, we've done our queries and things within this, and we could do that here as well. We could write a little bit of code here, a little getter that will get our event, and maybe it's sensible, depends on how many places we need to do this. But just to show you that it can be done outside of there, I'm going to do it here. And what I'm going to say here is final conf event equals await, which means it's going to have to be an async function. And so what we're going to await, this needs to be in brackets here, is our database select. We need to select from the table. Well, the table is our database conf events table. We want to select where, not where expression, sorry, where. Okay, and where is going to give us table like that. No, it's also given us too many brackets. And where we can say where the table, clearly the row, dot ID, so this is the conference event ID, equals, and we want to compare it to the event. So this is the state event ID. Let me finish this line off and I'll go over it. Get single. Okay, let's save that. So let's just look at this. This first set of brackets contains the query, basically. And the query is select from our conference events where for each of the tables, the table ID equals the event ID, and the event ID is the event ID that we've loaded in from our block event. And then, because we know that the IDs are unique and we know we're only going to get one back, we can call get single. Otherwise, if we could just call get, we'd get a list back, and it would be a list of one, but then we'd have to get the item out of the list. Get single is easier. Then finally we can omit our event screen loaded and pass in the event, which is the conference event. Okay, let's save that. Let's now come back to our event screen, and first of all wrap the widget, or wrap the scaffold with a block provider, because we need to provide the event screen block. We also need to provide or import the Flutter block library, and in here we need to provide the database, which we can do with context.read. Okay, then what I want to do is have an app bar for now. I'm not sure if I'm not really doing the styling for this, but we will put it in for testing. I want an app bar, and I want the title to be the text of the title to be the title of the event. So where do we get that from? Well, we get that from our block. So I'm going to wrap our app bar with a block builder, and the subject block is going to be event screen. Now we have a problem here. It's going to complain that a block builder isn't a preferred size widget, and that's because this app bar requires a preferred size widget. Well, we can get around that by wrapping the block builder with a preferred size widget, like that, preferred size, and we have to give it a preferred size. And the preferred size for an app bar is 56, I think. So const size from height 56. Okay, so an app bar is actually a preferred size widget. It does that. But now we've got this state, and we can say in here that the title for our app bar is, well, if state is event screen loaded, then it's going to be text widget with the state event title. And if we're not in the event state loaded, then we're just going to return null, have null as the title. Okay, let's save that and do a refresh and come to our app. Okay, we've got no errors, but we have no title, and that's because we haven't yet loaded the event. So how do we do that? Well, where we provide our block screen, at this point we can also add an event. and we can provide the load event widget and pass in the event ID which we've got from our arguments. And when we save that and refresh it, because it needs to rebuild the block, we now have our title up here starting with Flutter. And if we go to this nodeJS and express, we've got the correct title. Excellent. Okay, the next thing I want to do in our scaffold, so after our app bar, is I want to have a bottom navigation bar, and that's going to be of type bottom navigation bar. That takes items, and the items we're going to put in here, there's going to be two for now. We're going to have a bottom navigation bar item, and the icon is going to be icons dot subject. Let's put a comma in there and there, and we also have to provide a label, and this is going to be event details, and then I'm going to copy that, and our second one is going to be icon rooms, or room, which is going to be our event location, and we'll save that. Okay, so that should give us, if we come to our page, should give us this menu at the bottom. Now we need to handle switching between the two. So to do that, we're going to have to come back to our block and to our events, and we're going to have to create another class called switch page, which extends our event screen event. For that, we need a final event page type called type. That's going to need a constructor, which is going to need to be const, and we're going to need a props to override that type. Okay, let's come back to our block, and we need to create that handler for that event. So on switch page, we're going to switch page. Let's control dot and create that method. So what's the switch page going to look like? Well, it depends on what page type we're switching to. So I'm going to switch the event type, and this will tell us that we haven't got missing cases, so we can just control dot and add the missing cases. So if the type is going to be the details page, well, we're going to omit the current state, the copy with, but we haven't got copy with because it doesn't know what type of state it is. So we're going to have to cast this state as an event page loaded. We can then access the copy with, and we're going to copy it with the page is going to be event page details. Okay, and I'm just going to copy that and paste it here, and if we're at the type map, it's going to be the event page map. That can't be a const because we're going to be doing some more stuff later to that. Okay, so we've got those two states, we've got that done. We just need to call that from somewhere, or at least call the event from somewhere. And we do that from our event screen. And within the bottom navigation bar, we can put here on tap. And on tap gives us a value, and the value is going to be either 0 for the first item or 1 for the second item. It's just the way it does it. So it's not really a value, we'll call that index. And so we'll say here, we'll switch that as well. And we will say, if the index is 0, then context.read our event screen block and we're going to then add our switch page event and switch it to event page type details. Okay, and then if that happens, we need to put a break at the end of that to make sure we don't carry on. We just copy that and do case 1. It's going to be event page type map. Okay, so that's sort of going to handle our switching. However, that will throw an error. If we come to our debug console and I click on the map, we get this error. And it's basically telling us that here we haven't got a context that contains an event screen block. So if it works its way up the widget tree, it can't find a builder, or it can't find a context that has that builder in it. And that's because we're providing it in the same, essentially the same level that we're trying to use it. But we can get around that very simply by wrapping this bottom navigation bar, control dot, and we can wrap that with a builder which will return a context, and that will then work. So if I save that now and click on map, it should work. I'm going to refresh it because it didn't, but now it does. Okay, so if we come now to our builder main body here where we have our center, we need to wrap that with a block builder. And again, this is going to be the event screen block. And in here, we can say, it's going to be a couple of ifs actually. If state is event screen loading, then we're going to return a circular progress indicator. Else, if state is event screen loaded, then we're going to return something else. And that's going to be based on what type of page it is. So here we need to put if state page is event page details, then we're going to return, and for now we're just going to return this center. So we'll pop that in there. Else, if state page is event page map, we're going to return const of event map, and that's going to be a widget that we haven't built yet. So let's do that. Let's come right down to the bottom here for now and create a new stateless widget called event map. Now, the event map is going to return a Google map. And a Google map needs a couple of things, or it needs one thing really. It needs an initial camera position, which we're going to call event location. So we need to set that up from somewhere. So to do that, we're going to have to access the block builder again. So we're going to wrap this with a block builder. And again, this is going to be our event screen block. And within the builder, we're going to say final event location equals camera position, and the target is going to be a latitude and longitude. But we need to get that from somewhere. So we can set that up just before it and say the latitude and longitude equals latitude longitude of, and now we need to get the state. But we can't access the state easily because it's not cast. So I'm going to call this state here state in, and then I'm going to say here final state equals state in as event screen loaded, because we know that if we're viewing the map that it's loaded. And now here I can get state event latitude, and here we can get state event longitude. Okay, let's save that and click on our event location. Let's do a restart. I've got an error here that this widget, this block builder that we got of all these ifs might return nothing, and that's true. It shouldn't ever do that because we're dealing with all the states, but we are going to have to put in else, and we'll just return a size box. And we're going to have to do that twice, once for the page state, so where we're doing the if pages, and once for the screen state. So with that in, that should get rid of that error. And if we now refresh, let's come to our event location. Nothing happens. So I think what I've done is in our state, I may very well have, in our state here, I haven't overridden the props. And that's what happens with state. If you don't override the props, nothing knows what's going on. So we need to override with event and page. And with that, we have our map coming in. Okay, the map is zoomed out way too much. So let's come to our event screen and map, and we can also set a camera position. We can also set a zoom. Let's try 14. And if we click on event details and event location, we zoom in a bit further. I think we want to be a bit closer, maybe 16. Let's try 16 for our zoom. Yeah, that will do. Okay, so now we've got our map showing the right location, but actually we're not quite sure where the right location is. We've got no marker on the screen, and that's what we need to tackle next. However, we've done a lot already, so I'm going to save that for the next episode. If you've enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It does help me out, and we'll see you next time. Till then, take care, folks. Bye now.